Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Geometer's Compass. This is episode 6, and we are very excited. I'm Geoff here in Dublin, in Ireland, and this is
Scott Onstott in Victoria, Canada, and we're joined today by
Ebba Karlsson, or Ebba P. Karlsson in North Carolina, USA.
Great. And I want to kind of give us a backstory on Ebba and my relationship and how I came to meet her. I think it was around 2017 when you contacted me for the first time, and you asked me to write the foreword to your book, which I actually have here. It's called True Starlight. The subtitle is From Living in the Shadows to Being Stellar. I think what you were doing in this book was kind of beginning to step into your own power and stepping out of the shadow of your very famous husband at the time, who was a professional golfer. But it gives a backstory on your life where you started out from a very young age. Probably, were you a teenager when you became a model?
No, I was approached when I was younger, but I was very shy, so I didn't really want to embark on that journey. So it wasn't until I was 20 that I really took it seriously and went to France to work. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then you lived through that experience, and then in the book you recount how you were the victim of sexual abuse at the hands of your modeling agency in Paris.
Yeah.
And your book was actually very timely in coming out with the Me Too movement, as that was gaining steam.
Yeah, who would have known that that chapter have done so much. I never expected to embark on this journey, even though I suspected that it was a bigger thing. I always knew intuitively, but now I mean, we even went to the French Senate and spoke. I
wasn't aware of that. Wow.
Yeah. So the movement is really, it's been taking grand scales, and
you probably got a lot of interviews because of that revelation in your book. Is that right?
Yes, I've had TV channels come here, record. I've spoken in French television, German, Spanish radio. I've been all over, pretty much all over Europe, not in Sweden yet, which is very surprising since I'm born in Stockholm and I'm from Sweden. And also here in the US, it's been a little bit, it's coming though, but I guess because of the whole Jean-Luc Brunel case and Jeff Epstein, that has been taking a little bit more attention. And this is such a new case still. So, yeah.
Well, so that's kind of still going on in your life. That's interesting.
Yeah, very much so. I don't know where to start with this, because it's the more we dig into it, it's getting deeper and more complicated. And I can just say that what we're dealing with is what you both are familiar with. It's the whole cabal and the how should I say, this elite that have been using and abusing innocent people for a long, long time. And that's what we're dealing with. It's up there, and they have power, and the threats that we've been receiving, as I received 30 years ago, has been confirmed that it was legit. It was a legit threat. My life was threatened, and now we know that that's a fact, and it's horrific in that sense.
And I think it's interesting that these revelations are coming out by a lot of women all around the world, and it's almost like it's in the stars. And I kind of believe that this has been happening for thousands of years, and only now are we in a position, are women in a position to step forward and say, this is not okay, and we need to stop this, and we need to bring awareness to this. And so I think that's wonderful that you're kind of a champion of that. And but that is not why you connected to me, and I think that was because you watched Secrets in Plain Sight. And
yes,
recognized kind of that we were on a similar path through life, through our inner journeys of discovery, and that resonated with you. Is that right?
Yes, totally. I was actually in the midst of going through writing my book, and I spent some time with this amazing woman called Angela Loria, who launched this program called the Author Incubator in Washington, D.C. So I was there with my family, and I just finished the book, and I was contemplating who should I ask to write my foreword. And then as I've been, studying sacred life or hidden knowledge for many, many years, I came across your YouTube video and I was mesmerized. And as I saw this, we were in Washington, D.C., and you were talking about Washington. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the guy. I need to ask him to write my foreword. And I had no idea why it felt so important, because it wasn't really connected to my story on the superficial level. But I just knew I had to talk to you and ask you, and you resonated with it. And I think now looking back, it makes sense. But also my second book that I'm writing on now is also going to be much more into the sacred knowledge, the ancient wisdom of the Egyptians and the Atlanteans and all this. So it's all coming together in that sense.
That's great. And I know in the book, you were talking about going to the southwest of France and going to these Cathar initiation caves, and that was very transformative for you.
Yeah, definitely.
And I know that was way back leading up to 2017 when you wrote that. But since that time, you've gone on some adventures to Egypt, right? Multiple times, right? And so this story is just really kind of a snapshot of where you were then. And
yeah.
can you speak to that? Like,
yeah, I mean, we could go so deep in this because I was really called, and this is actually evolving sacred geometry, because YouTube is amazing, has been an amazing tool for me to meet people. And 2016, I came across this guy who worked with crystals, and I always loved crystals. And his name was Joe Ego, and he worked with Vogel crystals. And Marcel Vogel, as maybe you know, was a very interesting character. He worked for IBM and he developed the screen. He used quartz crystal and did a lot of science research. And he also had visions. So when he was working with crystals, he found that they spoke to him. And through sacred geometry, he created, he cut crystals in a certain form so he could help heal the world, and he became a healer. So as I learned about him, I was called to get a couple of these crystals in a crystal store here in North Carolina. And I did. And this story, and I tell this in the book, how this all came along. But these crystals actually had names and they spoke to me eventually. And that's when I realized I needed to go to Egypt, because actually I have them one of them here.
Cool.
So this was one of the first crystals. She's cut in a clear quartz. And
144 sides, or
this one has 13 sides.
Okay.
And I talked to this man called Andrew Bartzis, who's called the Galactic Historian. I did a session with him, and I asked him, I didn't know why these crystals came into my life. And he said, they're going to tell you their names and you're going to understand why they're in your life. So one day I just asked her, like, I didn't really want to believe it, but what's your name? And she said, Magdalena in Swedish. And I'm okay. And I had no idea why. That's my cousin's name. I didn't understand until the day I told my friend, and she said, oh my God, it's number 13. It's the sacred feminine. It's Mary Magdalene. And I had chills all over. And that's when she said, you got to go to France. There's this trip to France coming up. And I just knew I had to go. I had no idea why I had to go to this region. I didn't know anything about the Cathars or Mary Magdalene, nothing. And then I had this huge spiritual experience there. And then not only that, but later I had this other crystal, and that's the 144. So this one has 144 sides.
There's so many sides, it's hard. It looks smooth from where I'm
Yes, but you can see it if I don't know if you can see it like this.
Yeah,
so
we can see
very,
it. Yeah,
very fine on the surface. So this one is machine cut. And there are only 2 cutters in the world that cut Vogel crystals correctly. There are many copies, but this one is hand cut. So
Wow.
the big one, then I was like, I first held it. I'm like, is this some kind of laser gun? Because it feels like a kind of a weapon. And then I asked his name, and he said, my name is George. And I laughed because I had expected to hear some kind of alien name or something. I didn't know. And I was talking one day to my friend Joe, who introduced me to the crystals. And he was looking at me. He's like, wow, that's so cool. That's St. George. And I'm like, who? And then I just turned around, and behind me on my wall, where I lived before in my house, I had an icon that's like 500 years old from my grandma or my grandparents. One of the only things I have from them. And it's St. George and the Dragon. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it must be St. George. And then later I've been studying him, and I realized that's this is my sacred masculine, and this is my sacred feminine, and we work together. So we're like a trinity now.
That ties in with what you were saying in your book about how when you went in that cave, you had this epiphany, right? That your that and feminine sides were somewhat imbalanced at that moment, and that by bringing them back into balance, you would really be healed and be able to move forward on kind of in a new way, right? Yes,
absolutely. And I think, having been sexually abused as a woman, and I think this goes for any sexual abuse, whether you're a man or a woman, you cut off something. For me, it was like I hid my feminine side very deeply within me because I was so afraid. And it took years to heal that part of myself. I became very hardened and protected. I guess I tried to protect myself. So I became a very hard woman. And this feminine needed to come out and be healed. So that was the start of it wasn't really the start, but on the soul level, it was the start to come out and share my story.
Definitely. Yeah. And I felt like when you asked me to write the foreword, at first I was like, why is she asking me out of all the people in the world to do this? And then when I really pondered it, I recognized the same kind of signposts on your journey as I've had in my journey. And then I started to appreciate that there's this kind of superficial level where it doesn't make sense, like why you would ask me, but on a much more profound, deeper or soul level, we're like in the same kind of soul family or something, where we totally understand each other and we're coming from a deeper place where we feel at home. Mm-hmm. And I feel also that with Geoff, Geoff, you're like my soul brother, really. Mm. And I feel like I want to introduce you to my soul sister over here and realize that we're all kind of on a deeper level, we're all connected. And,
it feels like a privilege to be here. Yeah. And it's lovely to hear your story of connection, guys, and I'm not as familiar with your work, Ebba, as Scott is, but it's really a joy to meet you. And I'm just, as I'm listening to you, I'm picking up. Well, one thing I want to say as well, I just think it's incredibly brave of you to come out with your story and to sort of champion the cause of, people who have been sexually abused, to give voice to that. The more people who come out and do this brave act that you're doing, I just really admire that, so, rock on you, and I'm sure it's a huge service to many, many women and many, many people around the world that have gone through that journey. But in addition to that, what I'm very excited about, you being in Washington, D.C. and picking up on Secrets in Plain Sight, I could ask you 5,000 questions on that. The other thing that I quite like is I'm hearing you seem to have quite a skill in tapping into your intuition, and just the way you're talking about your crystals, and you're kind of going, and this guy said I should ask the name, and I was kind of feeling a bit weirded out. I could kind of see you in that state. I'm a bit like that too, but then I'm also the kind of person who goes, oh, feck it, I'll ask the crystal. Hey, crystal, what's your name? I'm Magdalena, or I'm George, and you do it. And then, it takes a certain type of self-confidence to trust yourself. yourself, you know, to trust the wisdom that's coming from within. Has that been a big part of your journey?
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely that was the start of the book, because I started meditating when I was 15, and I grew up in a family that was open spiritually. And then I've gone through a lot of therapies. I'm a Osho sannyasin, which is, I went through a therapist training, and I've done a lot of work on myself, but it wasn't really until 2012, my inner voice said to me, you have to set the 10th alignment. And I had no idea what that meant. And I started Googling, and I Googled and Googled until I found something that resonated with that message. And so that's kind of the backstory to the book, my spiritual awakening that happened 2012. And obviously I'm not the only one. I think a lot of people had that awakening at that time. And we all know that that was the end of the Mayan calendar, and how we were pushed into this new paradigm where we had to do that spiritual work. So as I heard that inner voice, I started connecting my higher self. And that was a practice I had to do, because I had been so much up in my head for so long, understanding things intellectually, but I hadn't gone through the wisdom in my body. I hadn't released the cellular memories. So that's when at the same time I started dancing ballroom, and I connected to this something very ancient within me, the dance and the connection to movement, and how we can awaken and heal through moving our body in space.
Amazing.
Yeah, even though ballroom is very like technical, it is an amazing tool to balance and to work with another being in communion with another soul. It's just absolutely mesmerizing. So I started dancing, and that's when I healed this part of myself that I have pushed away so long, you know, being a sensual woman and daring to step out in the world. So
that's beautiful. Yeah. And I'd like to hear more about dancing, because you see, what I'm picking up from you, Ebba, is this sense of you trust yourself, you trust this wisdom that moves from within. And, you know, it seems to have led you to these crystals. I didn't know that you were a dancer. That sounds amazing. And I have a huge amount of high regard for any modality that gets you into the body, you know, because I actually struggle with being stuck in my head a lot, you know, and I can feel quite disconnected from my body, you know, so I could really see how, you know, these embodied practices like dancing could be liberating. But I want to jump, I'm sorry, I'm bouncing all over the place here, but I want to get to Egypt. I'm not sure if I'm understanding it right, but have you traveled to Egypt? Has that been a part of your journey? Have you been there yet? Or is it something you aspire to do?
Yeah, my first trip to Egypt was with Freddie Silva, who I think Scott knows, and maybe you know too. He's Portuguese.
Yeah, I interviewed Freddie. Yeah, he's lovely.
You have? Yeah, I love Freddie. He's amazing,
and he's a big Crop Circle fan as well from the early days. Yeah.
He wrote a really great book called Secrets in the Fields. I think it was in the early 2000s, and it was really well written about the whole phenomenon.
Yeah, and he's really into Irish stone circles. And when I was speaking to him, I was saying, have this favorite stone circle, and he goes, that's my favorite stone circle too. And we were talking about this big stone circle down in Kerry. So yeah, Freddie is groovy. Yeah. So you went with Freddie to Egypt then, yeah? Yeah.
So one of his trips I went to, and that's also a long story, and that's probably going to be the next book, because how I open up to going there is also very interesting, because I met this crystal skull called Max, and I'm sure you have heard about the 13 crystal skulls, and he was here and visited with his owner Joanne Parks in Charlotte, and I had the opportunity to sit with him and meditate with him, and I started seeing these pictures of the pyramids, and I really didn't have a connection or a longing to go to Egypt at all at that time. But I started seeing these amazing pyramids with a gold capstone. and they it was funny because they turned into fly agaric mushrooms, and I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And then there were owls and grays and aliens. I'm like, this is so
Were you
weird.
at a rave at that time?
And I was not tripping on any mushrooms, I promise. But I wish maybe I should have, but it was just like, this is crazy. And that's, I guess I didn't understand that was the opening. But later I started hearing my name in my kitchen, and it's like, Ebba, Ebba. And I'm like, what is, and I felt the presence, and I'm like, what is going on here? This is so wild. And at some point I asked what this entity would be like, who are you? And the only thing that came out was like Tutan. And I'm like, is that some kind of relative? Like, I thought it was my grandparents, ancestor, I didn't know. And then I realized it was Tutankhamun. And at the same time, Freddie, I started listening to Freddie, and I saw his trip, and I'm like, I signed up immediately. I knew I just had to be there.
Wow.
So
when was this, Ebba?
That was 2008.
How long ago? 2008. Okay.
Yeah. No,
18.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I went there. It was amazing. I started studying more about Egypt, but then it wasn't until I guess August last year when I found out about Matthias De Stefano. He's an Argentinian young man who is like an indigo child who remembers his life in Atlantis.
Yeah, I've watched loads of his stuff on the Gaia TV. Yeah, he's I dig his vibe. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when I connected to him, I that was my soul brother. I had to go. I didn't know anything about him, but I signed up. So I went to, I think we were the first Western group to go to Egypt with him for this mission. He had like an alignment over a whole year. And all the things that he talked about Atlantis was just like, I just could remember, I could really see things, and it was just so interesting. So I started studying with him the Atlantean knowledge that was, the before Egypt in Egypt.
So can I I'm just trying to sort of line up the dots here. So you went to Egypt in 2018 on a Freddie Silva trip. And then did you go again at another time with Matthias De Stefano?
Yeah, 3 times.
De Matthias.
Yeah.
3 times with, okay.
So first was in October last year, and then I did go back in December, and then I went this year in March.
And you're planning another trip, aren't you?
Yeah, so now I'm going to start my own trips.
Amazing.
My own initiation trips there. So I actually talked to Scott about it because it would be fun to have Scott with me. I would love that. Maybe you too. That would be great.
Yeah. Oh God, I would love to go. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I got today? Because a friend of mine, Karen, who from the Crop Circle community, Karen Alexander, she's really encouraging me to read Temple of Man by Schwaller de Lubitz. I don't know if you've come across that book, but I ordered it. I literally just arrived today in the post, and it was from the book depository, and my neighbor dropped it in because the postman left it next door. And I was like, this can't be the book. It's so heavy. Like, it's this epic tome, of these just 2 volumes, and it's very, very exciting. I've just read like the front cover, and it's basically a deep dive. This guy, Schwaller de Lubitz, wrote it. I think it was first published in French in 1957, and Inner Traditions did a translation with a sacred geometer called Robert Lawler in 1998, and what I really like about this book, what my hope is that it's basically like a deep dive into how the Egyptians were using, their sacred geometric structures and their temples as a kind of a activator of consciousness, yes. And that they really were very, very advanced in being able to, leverage the qualities of geometry so that they could literally raise their frequencies and then plug into a much vaster experience of reality, which is something that I've intuitively always felt called to, So I'm just curious, have you come across like those principles on your journeys to Egypt? Or
yeah, I'm sure Matthias talks a lot about the sacred geometry of the Atlanteans and that everything was vibration. And the first time I went there with Freddie, I had a very spiritual experience in the temple of Abydos. I felt like I had Isis, Osiris, and Horus inviting me to come into the temple. And before I actually went into the temples, I always asked for permission. I didn't understand why. And I felt like the gatekeepers there, they have a lot of guardians because they have to protect the temples. And there was an immediate connection to some of them, and they would take me to certain places and power spots. And as I discovered that I had these codes with me that I was supposed to bring there to awaken something within the stones of these temples, and also there was codes that I could take from them. And I understood that it was me, it was the interaction between the stone, me, and the communication. I was awakening old memories. And it was fascinating because when I got out of the temple of Abydos, we went down to the Syrian temple. I took some photos of the flower of life, how it's engraved in one of the stones there. I didn't know, but when I came back to the boat, the cruise ship we were on, I looked on my phone. I'm like, oh my God, what is this? And these photos appeared that I hadn't taken. And it was all these.
Showed me, and they're really amazing. Like, where did these photos come from? They're kind of like
really
continuous
wow,
and they're more like textures and shadows. And
I'm gonna pull them up so you can see them.
Yeah.
But it was fascinating because they're like different kinds of orbs that are like, I don't know.
Wow, I'd love to see those. Can you share your screen, Ebba? And
I have them on my phone. So
don't worry. No problem.
Maybe you can hold your phone up to the camera.
Yes. Oh, gotta see here if I can pull them up. Let's see. Hang on a minute. Here we go.
The orbs are very interesting to me, to be honest. And
I don't know if you can see, that's the actual temple of Osiris. You can see the flower of life there. You see there?
Yeah. I know that glyph. Yeah.
That was the last photo. And after that, I go to the boat and I see these. And there's a little glare there, so it's hard to see. But there are actually faces in these. It's hard to see, but like
I get you.
Yeah, and especially up here, it looked like a little gray thing.
Wow.
Alien.
So it's really interesting.
It's like the spirits have figured out how to hack your phone.
I truly think so, because
I'm looking forward to the email that they send as well.
Yeah. Yes, totally.
There's lots of accounts of, strange, anomalous goings on directly in relationship to our technology, with a lot of people that visit crop circles as well. Like over the years, people have sort of had these experiences where their camera worked perfectly outside the formation. And then when they go inside the formation, it doesn't work. Or sometimes they're using those kind of like geiger-meters, I think they are, to measure electromagnetic activity. And, so I'm very, very open to, technology seems to be a touch point for these kind of like invisible intelligences to communicate with us,
I've had experiences like that too, Geoff. When my son was a little boy, it would always be like on his birthday. Of course, you take a lot of pictures on a birthday, but I would get hundreds of orbs in the photos on his birthday, but then other days, no orbs. So it's kind of like, it's a happy time, a celebration. It's like everybody shows up. And I think like each orb is like it represents a different being, and that could be like the trace that we see in our, three sense, three dimensions and everything. That's like the subtle trace of an unseen realm, where if you could actually fully go there, you'd be talking to a person. But this also reminds me of a guy I know who was kind of an acid tripper hippie guy. And he was saying he one time he went so deep, everybody was an orb. And he went outside in the forest and the deer was there, but it was actually an orb,
Wow.
I thought, that's interesting. Like he actually saw that in his own like altered state.
Mhm.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah.
I think that's very
Yeah.
true. I think that's when we leave this body, we have to be something, and that makes sense because it's light, it's energy.
Yeah,
So,
and it's a sphere. And remember one of our podcasts we talked about the circle and how it's sort of the most complete form. And I think if you had to represent the unrepresentable, you would do it with a sphere or a circle.
Mm-hmm.
You'd say, there it is.
yeah.
It's an efficient way to enclose space, and it makes sense. And there's a lot of accounts about orbs being having the sort of component of plasma, like these plasma orbs, which I'm quite interested in. The fourth state of matter. I'm very open to that whole orb field personally. It's something that really interests me, and I believe that there's probably as many types of orbs as there are people in existence. I'm certainly no expert, but I'm definitely open to the possibility that there are intelligences that can manifest, in a plasma state, that have kind of an orb form. And I really believe that we can communicate very directly, telepathically with these intelligences,
And
But
those orbs have been seen associated with crop circles. People have seen them in the fields. They have
yeah.
been, filmed in some cases. And so I think it's very likely that is a being, that's at a higher level. And we're just seeing kind of like its shadow in our shadow world here.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm wide open to the mystery of it, like you see, the more I've seen and the more sacred geometry has kind of unlocked my consciousness, the more I sort of open to admitting that I don't really know what these things are, is the truth. Like I'd love to say, oh, I've seen these orbs and I know what they are. I've seen some anomalous lights in the sky, that's for sure, but for me, I'm at the stage in my development, I probably need another 10,000 lifetimes, and then I can come back and tell you what it's all about, But for me, it's kind of just like a mystery, but the mystery is far vaster than we've been trained to believe by the conditioning machine of our culture, And so I suppose what the sacred geometry has done, both for Scott and I, is it's opened it's taken our blinkers off a bit, where we're quite expanded in terms of at least being open to, anomalous phenomena. And there seems to be more to reality, certainly, than we confront through our senses, How do you feel about that, Ebba?
Oh, I love what you just said, because to me, sacred geometry is the language of the abstract, because I am very much, as you said, intuitive, and I always feel, and I pick up and I see images, but I have had a really hard time to explain and make it realistic and make it grounded and understand. But with sacred geometry, it all makes sense. It's the language that we can use to describe the metaphysical world. And I think it's crucial that we understand it also and make it emotional. And I don't really know how to do that, because to me, I'm not a mathematician. I actually don't like math at all, but sacred geometry makes it so understandable because it's mechanical somehow. We can use it, we can make structure and understand it. And I think you're very good at that, Scott, of describing the geometry. So for a layman like me, it's easier. I don't know if that answered your question, but to me, it's been really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Scott this is Scott's greatest gift. He's like, that's what I think we have a lot in common, Ebba, in terms of we both connected with Scott because of his work and his ability to explain, these very kind of elaborate concepts, but then to give examples that enable you understand them. I've had many, many ahas, courtesy of Scott's work. Thank you, Scott. That have just opened me to, wow, isn't it remarkable that these patterns of order are embedded all around us, sometimes in simple things like beautiful ancient architecture or rose windows of cathedrals, but it also goes out further. It goes out into the dance of our solar system, the movements of our planets, the way Venus creates these gorgeous 5-pointed stars as it dances around our planet. And, these are all scientific facts, like Kepler identified this 400 years ago, And so can I ask one thing, Ebba? You know, like one of the things Scott and I have discovered is when you get into these kind of like esoteric arts or whatever, and you begin kind of like unlocking these mysteries, there's a component of it that's a little bit like of a solo journey, or certainly at the start, right? When I was starting out, I was having a lot of these epiphanies on my own. And, you know, I have to live in the world as well. You know, like I have a lovely family here in Ireland, and I have to do school runs, and I run a business. And, you know, very often, you know, you have to know your audience, you know, and there's times where, you know, it's not really, there's not a lot of spaces in my life where I can share my real passion for sacred geometry, for example. And one of the greatest fruits of creating Sacred Geometry Academy with Scott is that we basically attract like-minded people, like-hearted people, I like to say, you know. And it's very, very nourishing to connect with people and go, oh, wow, I'm not alone on this journey. There's plenty of people out there that kind of like share this passion, you know. And so it, you know, sometimes if you're carrying it on your own, it can feel a little bit, well, maybe lonely, I suppose, on one level, and sometimes a bit burdensome. And it's also very joyful then to go, oh, wow, connect with like-minded people. I'd love to ask you about your own journey with that. Have you struggled with opening to these great mysteries and then having to be in the world as well? You know, yeah,
totally.
I sense, yeah.
Especially,
how do you hold that balance?
Especially living in the Bible Belt, you know, like it's interesting how I ended up here. But that's another interesting story as well. But yes, I think it's a lonely road to be a seeker. I always been a lone wolf my whole life. And I never really felt like I belonged on this planet. But it helps to meet soul family and soul tribe. And I think it's necessary to seek people out that are similar minded for nourishment and to be held, to have space to express yourself. And that I kind of created my own tribe as I moved here and started sharing my business and my word and my message. So I have a lot of people who care about me, which is really grateful for. But of course, it's been challenging, and especially now, I feel, because we're so challenged when it comes to the vaccine, the corona, and all this. That has been challenging. But I also found like there are people around that look for these things and are awakening, and they need us to be the spearheaders. And so I think it's very crucial that we're all stepping up at this time and talking and sharing, and people will be drawn to joining communities like yours, and it's necessary.
I think that the more we go down our own individual roads, our solo roads of self-discovery, the further away we get from certainty and concrete kind of consensus reality that we all agree on, and we kind of open up to crystals and perhaps, or crop circles, or astrology, or some of these kind of woo-woo subject areas, right? And we become a little bit vulnerable when we're doing this exploration of like exploring things you don't really feel comfortable talking about to your business colleagues or at a dinner party or whatever. You don't really want people to ask you, so you're into sacred geometry, huh? What's that? You know, and you're like, oh my God, I'm on the spot. What am I going to say? And that's why I think Sacred Geometry Academy is kind of a good kind of protective umbrella or place where people can come together and talk about things that they're not even sure about themselves, you know, but they sense that there's some juice there, or there's some kind of personal growth that could happen in that place. And I think that's where we grow, is on the bleeding edge, where we actually put one foot into the unknown. And we're like, and we've grown enough personally to be brave enough to do that, you know, rather than just both feet solidly in the known. None of this is real, you know, which is kind of the default attitude that culture has.
Yeah. And I think we're also, as we're awakening, certain things, certain knowledge, or I mean, spirit reaches us in specific ways. Like for someone, it could be sacred geometry. That's how we awaken to our higher self and our spiritual consciousness. And for me, it's been a different journey. Maybe it was through meditation or astrology, but of course there are many, many ways, but they're all leading to the same core, the same source. So I think I was just going to tie it to where we started this conversation. You asked, now I'm seeing more and more why I'm connected to Scott, because one of the things that I learned why I was here in Charlotte was that I was a mound builder thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. This was something that Andrew Bartzis told me when he did my galactic soul reading. And I had no idea what a mound builder was until I did the research. And of course, they use sacred geometry when they build mounds and temples. They're aligned with the stars. And so I am sure of that we were connected back in the days, and we were building things together. And that's why we're back together building again on a bigger scale.
Exactly. It's we in another lifetime we were on the physical mundane level together, but now we're on a deeper level where we're like, oh yeah, I remember you. You know, there's some part of me that recalls that. It's kind of interesting how sacred geometry is like that. It's like a remembering process.
Yes, it is. Yeah. I was just gonna. I had one thing to say that I quite like about, just to sort of to call out maybe something that's emerging in this conversation, is that as we grow into our truth, or whatever way you want to put it, I know in myself, like, you know, like I'm 46 now, you know, and as I've been sort of like opening to these different like avenues of inquiry, or I'm very interested in sacred geometry, very interested in breath work, very interested in the ancient spiritual traditions, you know, and I would sort of compartmentalize my life. You know, I have for 2 decades, I've run advertising businesses, and then I would run these kind of esoteric sand mandala workshops out in a 300-year-old shell cottage. And, you know, but I would keep those two worlds separate, you know, and then I have a great interest in psychedelic trance music and going to dance festivals too, and I'd keep that. Oh God, I don't want the business people to hear that I do that one, you know. And then so I had all these different boxes for myself, you know. And one of the great things that's been happening, maybe this just happens everyone as you mature and you grow towards 50 or whatever, you know, but I don't know, just there's something to this where you stop trying to sort of like ring fence the little parts of you, and you just say, you know what, hey, here's all of me. This is me, you know. We're all just trying to get through this crazy trip of life, you know. We're doing the best we can, us and the 6.5 billion people on the planet, you know. And it's exhausting dressing yourself up over here and over here and over here, you know. And I have sense with you, Ebba, that you've had a similar, like, there's a sense of full disclosure, you know, because I know you've had a big history with modeling, and you had the relationship with the golfing celebrity, and, you know, like, these are all parts of your journey, you know, and rather than sort of hide these parts, I think there's something very one, it's empowering, but also I think it's very helpful for others, that the more we stop hiding parts of ourselves, we just say, you know what, here's all of me, you know, I'm doing my best. I'm not perfect, you know, I'm trying to find my way. And then, like, when people just sort of present themselves like that, there's a sense of like, oh, okay, wow, maybe I can hang out in this group, because, you know, it's like, I feel like that too, you know.
Yeah.
You know,
I think it's so true. And I struggle with that a long time, especially in the golf community, because I always felt like, this is not who I am. Like, I am not this kind of a golfer's wife that tag along and, you know, and yeah, I never really, I love golf, and I think it's an amazing sport when it comes to geometry, actually, and being in the zone.
Yeah, and you bet.
It's there for a reason. So I love that the core, the source of golf, the spirit of golf, and I've been to Ireland also in golf, you know, many times, and met many amazing golfers from Ireland. But I notice now, since I came out with my book, that I scared the living hell out of people because I
Yeah.
was challenging their how should I say this, the momentum, their life, what they build up as their belief systems. I challenge their belief systems about life, and that can be disruptive and uncomfortable. Uh, but I also have received a lot of, I actually talked to one person this morning who is in the golf world, and he said, "You're amazing." And they come to me in private and share what they say, maybe not socially in groups, but one by one. I know that I've been inspiring them to be who they are. And we can't afford not to at this point. It's so crucial that we all align with all aspects of ourselves in this dimension, and have the courage to, as you said, share who am I on all level. Because if we don't, people are not gonna do it. We have to. It's like we have to be the lions that are roaring, so others can feel safe and do the same.
And everybody has that thing going on where they have different aspects of their life. And I think it's encouraging to see it when people step into their own power and become stellar, as you say in your book, you know, and people admire that, and they're like, wow, you know, Geoff is into trance music and he also runs a business, you know.
It's so
Me
cool.
too,
It's awesome.
Or, you know, Scott is into all kinds of woo-woo stuff, but he's also really grounded and rational too, you know. So
that's what makes us juicy
encouragement.
Yeah, I have a funny story about that. You know, that when I got into all this stuff, because I was always just quite drawn to, you know, the mysteries of the universe, and I was into making mandalas and sand mandalas. And very early on, when my peer group hadn't really got much experience of that, you know, it was a bit like, oh, we better be careful of Geoff because he's going a bit weird, right? It was a bit like, whoa, Geoff's into weird stuff, you know. It's going back 20 years, you know. And like, I adore my friends, you know what I mean? And I was like, for me, it's like, it wasn't that weird. It was just like, I'm just making mandalas. Like, I love geometry. It wasn't, you know, it never felt weird to me. But they were like, whoa, you know, I was thinking of putting a mandala down in like this like, you know, lovely holy Catholic church for my own wedding. And it was just way off bounds, way off limits, you know. But even back then I was like, it didn't really freak me out in the way it did others, you know. But over the years, right, what's kind of happened is what started with keep away from Geoff, he's into weird stuff, you know. Now more and more the world is changing, and now I'm getting more and more people coming towards me going, hey, you know that weird stuff you're into, do you mind if I ask you about it? You know, I'm kind of curious about, hey, tell me about that weird stuff, you know, I want to know about that weird stuff you're in, you know. And people are kind of much more open, it seems. And it's a bit like I feel an endorsement of like to thine own self be true, you know. If you just, because I didn't really try and change the world or be evangelical in any way. I was just like, oh, maybe it's not for everyone, you know, and that's okay, you know, but I've got this trip and it works for me, and that was enough for me, you know. And I just stayed with it. But when you stay true to the, I'm talking about the things that are really you at the deepest level, you something happens where people begin to see that you're being the real you know, and that's kind of empowering for not just you because you're being who you are, but people sort of go, here, what are you doing with that trip? I want to know more about it, you know. And I sense that with you, Ebba, I sense with you, Scott, and I think more and more, you know, like, I mean, Sacred Geometry Academy is all about geometry, and we're geometry this and geometry that. But Scott and I joke that the geometry really is just a canoe, just like you were saying, Ebba. It's just one way through to the mystery, you know, and there's probably 10,000 different canoes you can choose to open the doorway through to the vastness of being, or whatever, you know.
The canoe is just to get you across the Nile. Okay, let's not
yeah
it's all about the freaking canoe, because that's what everybody thinks. Oh, it's all about geometry. Geometry is just a vehicle, folks. It's only to get you there.
Exactly.
And
that's it.
The point is to get you there. And there are probably other ways to get you there, you know, that we're not doing here, but the point is to get across the river and go explore the pyramids. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
we want to go from the mundane to the sacred. And geometry is a wonderful vehicle because it's so devoid of baggage. There's not a big tradition about, the saints with it. Anybody can access it no matter what culture you're in. It's a universal. And so join us,
And it's really the shift. We know it's happening. It's been 25,000 years, the movement of the galactic, how do you say it? Help me, Scott. The
precessional cycle.
The precession, yeah. And I think we can feel it now. We can feel the shift, the polar shift, whatever is happening, where we're bringing down more energy from the universe to enlighten us. And there's an explosion of awakening. I see it more and more. People are just really asking more questions and discovering more and researching more. And it's very, very beautiful.
Like on a really simple astrological level, we're coming out of the age of Pisces, which is about control and patriarchy and father knows best and so on, to like the Aquarius age, where it's all about empowering the individual human. And it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to understand. And suddenly it's all happening, and it's sort of like the rising tide is floating all of our boats. And we're like, oh my God, I see all these connections where before they were just so much like islands, but now I see connections between them,
Yeah,
definitely.
Well, listen, I'm probably doing very poorly on my timekeeping, because so I was saying to you, Ebba, before, Scott and I were hoping to keep this short format. We keep on slipping though, because the conversations are so wonderful, and it's really amazing talking to you. And I know we could talk for a long lot more time, but I think what we'll do is we'll cap this as like, maybe this could be our first conversation of hopefully many to come, Ebba. It's been such a joy speaking with you. But before we go, I wanted to just give you the opportunity to share with any of our listeners, like, where they might go. You were talking about maybe you're doing a trip to Egypt. It sounds really exciting. Or I know that you do some online courses. Where can people find you? Where can they go to experience your work?
Yeah, so I'm actually rebuilding my website. It's called truestarcoaching.com. So hopefully by the end of this year, it's going to be redone. And I'm launching a program called True Star Awakening, which is a 9-week program where people really can, through ancient tradition, go through their chakra system, aligning and grounding their bodies, awakening to their higher self, and learning techniques how to do that. And hopefully those people want to come with me to Egypt and experience the whole temple, visiting the temples and aligning with the temples and reawakening those ancient codes that will be awakened when you go there, because they will change your life. It always will. So
Sounds
so
amazing.
that's and anybody who has a question can always email me also at ebba@truestarcoaching.com. I'll try to respond to them.
And also just the title of your book. I'm sure that's available in all, wherever you get your books from, I presume. Is it? It's
True Starlight. True Starlight.
True Starlight.
Yes, and it's on Amazon or any Barnes and Nobles here in the States. But absolutely, Amazon has it. And if they want to buy it, they can also go to my website. I will start selling it there also, so that they can have my signature if they want.
That sounds great. Sounds great. Yeah, you bet. You bet. Wonderful, Ebba. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor speaking with you. And I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation. Let it be the start of many, many more, because as we're building this tribe of like-hearted people, we just want to light a fire and stay in touch,
Yes.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's been an honor to be here. Thank you.